Buenas noches. Buenas noches. Bienvenida. Vamos a empezar. Antes de empezar, vamos a hacer el Padre Nuestro. ¿Alguien tiene el papelito? ¿Ya lo recuerdan? ¿De memoria? No tiene copias. I didn't have copies. I just got Libby's copy. Mrs. Ruiz and Ignacio, they're not here today, but they will come back next week. So they cannot be here. They have to travel to Mrs. Ruiz's brothers passed away, so they have to travel to Florida. So that's the reason why but they will be here. So I didn't want to mess up the screen, so so everybody remember Padre Nuestro? If no, you repeat. Padre Nuestro, que estás en el cielo, santificado sea tu nombre. Venga a nosotros tu reino. Hágase tu voluntad en la tierra como en el cielo. Danos hoy nuestro pan de cada día. Perdona nuestras ofensas, como también nosotros perdonamos a los que nos ofenden. No nos dejes caer en la tentación y líbranos del mal. Amén. Hoy tenemos a una de nuestras compañeras. We have today one of our students, let's call it student. She already know a lot. And she made a wonderful trip with her husband, so she was happy to help us to present today. So, Libby Gillette, right?
I have some things I can pass around about our cruise. We went on a cruise we wanted to do a cruise to the Galapagos Islands, but we decided we should stop in Quito first and tour that. So we did this in January, and I volunteered to give a presentation about our trip, and the Institute agreed only if I would speak English. So I'll keep my Spanish to a minimum. So I have some things I can pass around while doing the presentation. So here's some stuff that they can see. And this too. And this. Okay. So first we went to Quito, which is the capital of Ecuador, which is right there, and then we had a cruise on to the Galapagos Islands, which are 600 miles to the west of the coast of Ecuador. And Ecuador is the capital of, Quito is the capital of Ecuador, and was constructed on the foundations of an ancient Inca city. And the altitude of Quito is about 9,000 plus feet, in comparison to Cusco, Peru, which is 11,000. Is that right? Yeah. So when you go to Cusco, they really warn you about altitude sickness, but I didn't get any warning for Quito, but it's 2,000 feet less, so maybe that's why. So anyway, we arrived late that night and to our hotel. So we decided that the first day we would just take it easy. And so on the next slide is a view of, that's a view from out of our hotel of Quito. And we stayed in the hotel that the, what's that? Oh, people can't hear me?
On the back? Can you hear on the back?
But they can hear me. Is that too? Hi, Ned. So we stayed in the. Boy, that's loud.
I tried to. I don't know where.
I'll talk loudly. You don't have to use this. Yeah. Which is better? this or that? Okay, me too. Gracias. So, my husband noticed that there was a teleférico going up the mountain, which ended up being a volcano. And so the first day, that's what we did. We went, go ahead, and so we got on the teleférico and went up to the top of the volcano. And you can go one more. So that's the view. When we got to the top, it's a beautiful view, but you could go even farther. And so my husband said, let's hike up to those swings up there. And I started to feel really poorly. And then I remembered Cusco at 11,000 feet. You have to adjust to the altitude. And now we've gone up 4,000 more feet. So now I'm at 13,000 feet. And I said, I started to feel poorly. So I went into this little coffee shop here. It was a beautiful view, and asked for mocha tea, but they didn't have it. So they said, how about coca tea? So I had a cup of coca tea, and I felt so much better after that. The rest of the day was fine. I even had a beer that night. Okay, so that's all I had to say about our first day. Okay, so the next day, we met our guide in our hotel, and she came. We met her from Tours by Local, and she had been giving these tours for 30 years. So we hired her for 2 days, and the first day she wanted to take us around the outskirts of Quito, and so she picked us up, and she said, where do you want to go? Would you like to go see a rose farm? And we said, yes, we would love that. So we're headed out to the rose farm, and she stops and starts handing money to some people in the street through the car window. And my husband said, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm giving money to the Venezuelans that have had to come here. And Mark said, well, how do you know they're Venezuelans? And he said, because the Venezuelans are much better looking than we are. I thought that was so funny. Anyway, so we went to this rose farm, and the flower industry, the rose industry in Ecuador is $1 billion industry, and their main clients are the United States and Russia. And they grow beautiful roses. We'll go next. And they grow beautiful roses. So as we were walking along, some ladies were picking the roses that they thought were ready to be shipped. And why are the roses here so beautiful? It's because, well, the explanation I was told was there's more daylight on the equator, number one, for the roses to grow. And because they're at higher altitudes, it takes them longer to grow, so that they develop a longer stem. So they have the roses are beautifully long-stemmed roses with a variety of colors, pink, red, white, lavender, yellow, and mixed hues, over 500 varieties. So on the next slide, there's a tiny little video of, they can get it started, of a woman packing the roses that were just picked that day. I think you can just, isn't there a starter button there? We don't have to see the video. There she goes. So she packs, I think she does 12 in a package. And they treat their employees really well, because I said, when did they get a lunch break? And they told me, and then I said, what's for lunch? And they actually make them lunch every day. And I was trying to ask them in Spanish, so it was fun. So the next slide shows you her work. And then on the next slide shows you what they're going to ship out that day.
Oh, wow.
In refrigerated trucks, and then to the airport, and it goes off on the plane overnight, refrigerated.
That's how we get the FTD roses. The next slide.
Please, por favor. So, okay, now I've gone to the countryside of Quito, where the mostly indigenous people live. And because my guide has been doing this for 30 years, she's got a lot of connections. So she knows, you know, she wants to take, so she knows where to, she calls this person. She says, excuse me, I have to make a phone call. First of all, she called the Rose people and said, can I give a tour today? And they said yes. So then she calls this man and says, is your father-in-law around? We'd like him to show my clients his trade. So he said, yeah, I think I can find him. And so he'll be standing outside of his home. So the next slide will show his home, but I didn't get a picture of him standing out there. So what he does is he works with wool, and he weaves garments like this shawl and this scarf, and all from wool that he purchases from people out on the street that have already cleaned the wool. So here he is. The first thing that we did when we went in there was he showed us how he was weaving with his machine, but neither Mark or I got a picture of it or a video, and he sat on the floor, and it was unbelievable. But now we got a video of him combing his cotton, the raw cotton, clean cotton that he got. If you can start that, there he is. Oh, wow. He's taking it to create a strand of wool. If I said cotton, I meant to say wool. A strand of wool. So we can go to the next. We don't have to go all the way through that. We can go to the next one. If that's convenient. So now, if you start that video, it shows the strand of wool that he's done from combing, taking a ball of wool, and he's made that strand. So then, he's going to convert that into thread. And so that's on the next video. And what he does is he uses a spinning wheel. If you can start that, he takes that strand of wool, and this spinning wheel is over 100 years old. He inherited it from his grandmother who taught him the trade of weaving the wool. So there he is. And actually, we don't have to watch all of it, but it does break and he has to reattach it. But he's very patient. And so there's the wool, there's the thread that he's going to use to make his garments. So, you know, here he was. He showed us how he did the weaving, and so what we had to buy something. So
that's beautiful.
So I'm the owner of a shawl, and Mark is the owner of
it's just beautiful.
The scarf that he made by hand. It was really quite amazing. It's made of wool. So
I don't want to pass it around and because it can get dirty with, but you can come later and okay, it will be easy to explain.
All right. So then after this, we went to La Mitad del Mundo, the equator, which is what Ecuador is named after. It's the Spanish word for equator, and that's the actual line of the equator. And we straddled it just to try to look cool. It was very interesting. They gave a wonderful presentation to explain it, and I bought it, a CD and a booklet, and it's both in English and Spanish, so I haven't looked at it yet. Okay, so we can go on. Okay, so the next slide is the next day, when our guide comes back to get us for the next day. She's going to take us to see old Quito, the old historic center of Quito. And so when she picks us up at the hotel, she says, I have a driver. So you have a driver today? And she said, yes. And so you get to the car, and it's her mother. Vivian was our guide. She couldn't drive that day because they had a traffic problem in Quito. So you can either drive on even or odd days, depending on your license plate. So, but her mother is elderly. I think she's like 2 years older than I, and they can drive any day. They're exempted from this rule. So she has a chauffeur, and so it's her mother's driving us. Mark's in the front with her mother, and I'm in the back with Vivian trying to speak Spanish. So she takes us. So the first place we go to the old historic center of Quito, which is really impressive. It's the first city in the world to be declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978, and only second after the Galapagos as a heritage site. And Quito is one of the best preserved colonial, Spanish colonial cities in Latin America. The first she took us to is a hill, and it's called a panacea. And a panacea is a piece of bread in Spanish. It means a piece of bread, maybe a little loaf of bread. And what it is a hill, a volcanic peak. And on it is this huge statue of the Virgin of Panacea. And so what used to be here in Inca times was a beautiful sun temple, but the conquistadores came and destroyed it. And so Quito wanted to put a monument there. So they, this was modeled after a 48-inch wooden sculpture that was done during the Spanish colonial time at the Quito School of Art in 1734. So this huge statue was modeled after that, and this wooden statue, we saw it. It was displayed in one of the convents that we visited. So a Spanish sculptor made this statue out of 7,400 pieces of aluminum. Each piece was clearly numbered, and then when he was finished, he disassembled it. It was shipped to Ecuador, and then they reassembled it, like following the numbers, and put it back up on its base, and it was finished in 1976. So the next slide shows you the view from the Panacea. Am I pronouncing that right? Panacea, the little hill. And so here's old Quito, and it's so well preserved, and then the cathedrals or churches are back there, and then it stops, and that's the modern city back there. But this is the old restored colonial Quito. So the next place we visited was the Basilica y Convento de San Francisco, and this is the courtyard. And the next slide shows us the church. And then she wanted us to climb to the top. We did a lot of climbing, but this was established in 1536 by the Franciscan monks and finished 150 years later. And it's a mixture of architectural styles. If you go to the next slide, you'll see we're on the top now, and kind of a Moorish-looking dome. And then up, you can see the Panacea, the hill over there, and there's the statue. So you can see the statue from anywhere in old historic Quito. You'll see her. So moving on. This is a street I took a picture of because down the street are a lot of tiendas, artisan stores that were fascinating, the work that they did. So I just threw that in there to show one of the streets. And on the next slide, we went to the next convent, which is called the Convento de Santo Domingo. And that here is the plaza, and that is a statue of General Sucre. He was the big hero in Ecuador. Now, Bolivar was too, but this was the biggest hero. He came up through Peru and was able to win the city over from the Spanish.
Is Sucre, did they say it was from Venezuela, Sucre?
Yes, he's a very close friend of General Bolivar, and he's from Venezuela as well.
Yeah,
and they're really good friends.
So he was the person from Cumana, the one that we talked a couple of weeks ago.
See.
The same person.
See. And so there he is. He's the big hero there. And they also used the monetary unit used to be the sucre, but now it's the U.S. dollar, which made it very easy for us when we were there. So on the next slide, we see a view from the square. We climbed to the top of everything, so we saw a view from there. And then the next slide, you'll see the church of the Santo Domingo. And then to our pleasant surprise, on the next slide, we ran into an Antigua cerveceria, which is where the monks made beer back then because it was safer to drink beer than it was the water. So I said, well, did they sell beer here? And they said yes. So on the next slide, we investigated. This is, I'm sure this is a replica of their brewery. And on the next slide is our guide. We treated her to a beer, and she was very accepting because her mother was driving, so she could have a beer. She said, oh, good, I can have one. So that was fun. And then this next slide, she wanted to show us the Panama Hats. And we did not realize that Panama Hats, it's a special art, and it's only made in Ecuador. They're not made anywhere but in Ecuador. One place is Cuenca, and the other is Monte Cristi. And they're made by these people that have been trained. They're actually made from leaves of what I think is called a toquilla palm tree, which are grown along the coast. And it takes at least 30 steps to make these hats. First you have to pick the leaves, and then you've got to shred them, and then you probably have to dry them. I made that up, and I'm sure you have to. And then you have to boil them and bleach them, and there's 30 steps, and then they weave them, and it takes 3 to 4 months to make one hat. And the tightness of the weave, the tighter the weave, the higher the quality of the hat. So in this store, maybe you should get a hat, and the prices range from $500 to $34,000.
Oh, wow.
Then we decided not to buy one because if we lose them, the wind will blow them off, and somebody will get our nice hat. On the next slide, it just shows the palm leaves up there and different hats. Now, at the hats that were really, really expensive, they look like the potato chip Pringle to me. The rim, because you can't even see any weaving. It's just solid, and it's light, and it's flexible. I think you could just stick it in your pocket and pull it out, and would have it shake. It was really quite something. We probably should have bought one. Okay, on the next slide, where did we go? Oh, we went. This is another church, but a very famous church in Quito. It's called the La Iglesia de la Compañía de Jesus. La Compañía is for short, and it's called the Church of Gold. So the outside of the church was started in 1605, made all out of volcanic rock, and it was finished in 1765. And if you go to the next picture, they wouldn't let us take a picture, but I got this off the internet. It's just the Church of Gold, all its gold leaf. And my guide, Vivian, wanted to get married in here. And I said, well, how much would that cost? Can you do that? And she said, yes, it would cost $500. And I said, well, that's not too bad. And so there was an electrical fire, and so she couldn't get married there. But one of the artisans that we visit helped repair it because he could do gold leafing, if that's a term. So on the then to continue, we went to an artisan chocolate tienda, and they took us through all the steps of how to make chocolate. It was delicious. See, when Vivian takes us to these places, she figures they're willing to show us these things because they're assuming that we're going to buy something. Which we were happy to buy lots of chocolate. So.
I thought you were going to buy that house.
This was across the street. I didn't get a picture of the chocolate, but I just threw that in. And then this is across the street, and this was for sale. And what caught my eye was the little plaque up there. You can't read it, but it says in Spanish, Bolivar danced here. Did anybody watch the miniseries Bolivar? Mark and I did, although he stopped after. There's a ton of episodes, and we had the English subtitles, and it was so interesting. But he came to Quito. That's where his lover threw flowers at him, and he noticed her, and they became a pair, and they went to dances. I mean, it was all there, all in the miniseries I saw here. It was really cool. I said, "Oh, we remember that from the miniseries." So on the next slide, so we have to stop here a second. We're going to go for our cruise now. It's the real reason we went to Ecuador. and we went to the Galapagos Islands, and there's basically, so we flew from Quito to Guayaquil to San Cristobal Island, and there are 6 larger and several smaller volcanic islands that lie near, or yeah, that's where we landed, and so there's the equator up there. So this is what we took our cruise around. It was so cool. And so I was just going to mention that they were created from volcanoes, and the processes still go on today. These processes, plus with the extreme isolation of these islands, led to the development of very unusual wildlife, animal life. The Spanish discovered them by accident in 1535, and they got their name because the Spanish thought some of the turtle shells looked like their saddles, their riding saddle, and that riding saddle is called a, I don't see an accent on this, so it's like maybe a Galapago. Galapagos, I would think it, but there was no accent. Anyway, so, on a second. Anyway, so, that's how the islands got named, just because the Spanish thought that the turtles looked like riding saddle. So the Galapagos Islands. And nobody was that interested in the islands. The whaling vessels and Navy pirates went by there and stopped to get fresh water and fresh meat, but nobody thought these islands were of any value. And then what we were told by the naturalist was that this man that was friend of the early president of Ecuador said, you should claim the Galapagos Islands as part of Ecuador. And so he did. But their friend wanted him to do it so he could raise his cattle there. But it turned out that it was not a good place to raise cattle. So it was claimed by Ecuador in 1832, shortly after gaining independence from Spain. And then in 1835, Charles Darwin went there to study the wildlife, and that inspired his theory of evolution by natural selection. And okay, so when we went there, we did, I was expecting these to be uninhabited islands, and I was expecting an airstrip, maybe in a desert or in a forest. That's what I was expecting. But on the next slide, we're approaching, and that's what it looks like. That doesn't look like anybody's there, but we think that's our ship. And on the next slide, I went, oh my gosh, there's people living there. And this is San Cristobal. See, and this is where the airport is. So on the next slide, you see the airport. So we all get our bags, and they tell us to go over here, and they tell us which bus to get on, and we get on our bus, and we can't wait to get to the cruise ship. But on the next slide, we'll show you that we had a slight problem. There was a volcanic eruption in Tonga over here, and they told us that a tsunami was coming to the Galapagos Islands, and that we couldn't go to the ship. So we said, well, we want to see it. But they said, no, we're taking you to the top of the island because we need to play it safe. And so we had to wait up there like 2 or 3 hours. And at the top of the island, there was a little shelter, and it was kind of like a bar. They had a refrigerator, and they gave us beer and popcorn and M&Ms and Snickers. So that's what we had, and we were starving because we were supposed to have this nice lunch on the cruise boat, but that's what was our lunch. So, okay. So on the next slide, we finally get to go to our cruise ship. So this is at the dock where we get on our Zodiac. That's the little boats that take you to and from your cruise ship. And they have a special way of getting out of the boat because it can be tricky. And you have to hold on to them, and they put towels down. But there are some sea lions resting on the dock. And on the next slide shows us approaching our cruise ship and our Zodiac. And then on the next slide shows us, now we're in our cabin, and we have a little deck outside our room. And so this is what we would get to look at every night. Or when we come back from our activities, we could sit out here and look at the view of the Galapagos Islands wherever we are that particular day, and have a beer and before dinner, and it was just wonderful. But that night we had to have a briefing, like you always have to do on a cruise, and we met our 5 naturalists. And the 5 naturalists grew up on the Galapagos Islands, and then they went off to get an education to be a naturalist on the mainland. And they were hired by this cruise company, and they were Ecuadorian, and so was the captain. So everybody there was from Ecuador on the cruise ship. And so the first thing the naturalist said to us is, "Are you ready for a nice, relaxing cruise? Then you're on the wrong cruise." Because most of our activities start at 7 in the morning, and we go from one to the other, and you need to be on time. We divided you up into 2 groups, and we were in Group B. But the good thing was, because there was so much coronavirus going on in January, our boat was only half full. So that made it a lot nicer.
So how many people were there on the
We're supposed to be 100, there were 50, 47. So that made it really nice, too. So let's see. So this is the first day of our cruise. We went to the Tortoises Island. So we went from quite a ways up near the equator, I believe, and we had a hike, 7 in the morning. Group B had to go first, so we had this wonderful hike. This is how you disembark from your Zodiac. This guy helps you, and then you climb up these stairs, and you have to be really careful. So the next slide just shows what it looked like when we got there, Volcanic Island, and then the next slide shows we had to walk on these. They built these wooden pathways, decks, so we could not leave it because they didn't want us to damage the habitat. And the next slide just shows it again. And then the next slide shows they just show you the different geological rocks from the volcanoes. And you can see the lava flow on this one. And here is a volcano crater in the water. And there's our boat right behind it, our ship. And then the next slide is a view from the island when we're hiking. It just doesn't look like this world. It was amazing. It was beautiful. And then the next slide shows the beach that we had to go and practice our snorkeling on. And I'm not much of a water person, so I acted like I'd never snorkeled before, so I could get a lesson. And I was pleasantly surprised that all the equipment didn't leak, and I learned how to breathe through that thing, because I don't breathe through my mouth very often. But I got the hang of it, and one lady said, "Keep your arms down and just kick your flippers, and then you won't scare the fish." So we practiced here, and this is where I went to the shore and took my flippers off, and there was a little sea lion right there. So I thought, well, I'm going to go say hi to it. So I said, "Hi," and it started coming at me, and I sort of held my flippers like this, and it kept coming, and it kept coming, and I just finally turned and ran away. So I was hoping that they got that on a video, because we had a photographer with us. I thought it might be funny, but he didn't catch that. So now we're leaving, and in the afternoon this time we had a Zodiac tour around the island to look at the volcano, the different parts of what it looked like throughout. But on the next slide, I think, is a short, unprofessional video of the scene from the Zodiac, just to show the different geological formations from the volcanoes. It's just a short one. And we ended up at that little island there, and we got really close, and he shows you the crabs, and he'll show you, oh look, there's a blue-footed booby. They love talking about the blue-footed boobies. I don't know why they kept talking about it. But, And there's, you know, it was really fun to take those zodiac tours around the island. Okay, so that night, I realized I could order a pisco sour, so I don't know how I got in there. There it is. So they said we're in for a pleasant surprise. On our way to our next island, you would see lava flowing from the Wolf Volcano on Isabella Island. The volcano erupted 2 weeks before, and it was still flowing. So we got to see the flowing of the lava, and I have one more slide of that there. And so then we headed to our destination for the next day. So the next day, we were on Isabella Island, and we took a zodiac tour to look at the geological formations. So on the next slide, we come and we see a penguin that's just sitting on one of the volcanic rocks, and it's one of the smallest breeds of penguins. They never leave the islands; they're always there. They're endemic to the islands, and they're the only penguin that lives above the equator, but not very far, because, you know, the equator's right there. So that was fun to see. So what's on the next slide? Okay, in the afternoon, we had a walk on a different island, Fernandina Island, which is just west of the Seahorse. You can pass this one. So this is Fernandina Island. We came all the way around, saw the volcano, and now we're over here. But before that, we went snorkeling. So there's a lot of activities every day. So we went on the Zodiac tour, then we went snorkeling, and then we went on this. But the snorkeling, I just wanted to mention real quick, so it's my first time deep sea snorkeling. They dump you out into the deep sea, but you have a wetsuit on that comes from here to here over your bathing suit, and it's kind of buoyant, which is helpful. And so I jump in, because I'm not much of a water person, sport person, but it was my funnest activity. I started doing what that lady told me to do, and I saw all this beautiful fish, and then here comes a sea turtle, and he accidentally bumps me, and then I thought Mark went by, but I turned around and it was a sea lion, and oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then we saw a penguin swim by, and you're in another world, and I just loved it. So anyway, then we went to our land excursion on Fernandina Island, and here we got off. You see cactus growing, and the sea iguana. The sea iguanas love to eat cactus and other things. But next slide, let's see what do we see. Oh, here's a little video of a sea lion, like the one that chased me, but it's not the same one. It doesn't seem to be moving. It must be in slow motion. That's in slow motion for whatever reason. But that's okay. And he ends up by a sea iguana there. So on the next slide, here's a video of the sea iguanas on the same shore. I don't know if that's going to be in slow motion too. This looks like, I can't tell, but I think they're just all running over each other on the, there's hundreds of them, it looks like. And then on the next video, I decided to show that just because in the distance, toward the end of the video, you can kind of see the scenery of the islands. This is where we were, and there's the sea lions taking a little dip. And then if you look in the back of the film, you'll see, all of a sudden you'll see a volcano, and you'll see another island. That's Isabella Island there, Isabella Island. So it's just really fascinating. Okay, so this is the next day. We have an adventure hike on to Darwin Volcano. But when we were getting off the boat, and we couldn't use the stairs because they were occupied. So we had to hike up the side. So I just have another slide of this hike. It's just, this is a crater that got filled with water, and I think they call it Lake Darwin. And over here was the Darwin volcano. And then that's our cruise ship in the distance. They're waiting for us to come back from our hike. So, okay, so this is, when is this? This is, this is in the afternoon, after we did our kayaking. Then we're going on a Zodiac tour to the Mangroves on Isabel Island. But before we get there, we come to Happy Rock, they call it, because all the creatures hang out there together and they're all peaceful and happy. So in this particular part of the rock, you can see two blue-footed boobies and a cormorant, a wingless. It's really a wingless cormorant because they can't fly. And the reason they can't fly is they never had a predator on the Galapagos Islands, so they never developed wings. I don't know how they got off the rock. I can't believe they can't fly, but they said they can't fly. Okay, on the next, there's some blue-footed boobies. Can you see they're blue? And they have red ones, red-footed ones too. And in this picture, that's the best I could do with my blue-footed boobies. Okay, so on the next.
Oh yeah, you can see.
Okay, so on the next, we ran into a pelican on the rock on the way to the mangroves. And finally, I guess we're heading to the mangroves now on the next slide. And it's not really that, you can see if you can play it. It just shows, there's nothing too exciting. We just headed into the mangroves. Now, it's thought that the mangroves originated in the Far East, and the seeds over millions and millions of years floated across the west ocean to the Galapagos Islands. And that's how they got here. That's what they think. And they can grow in salt water, and their root systems extend out of the water, and they can filter out the salt. It's just, amazing. So we went on the next slide. We went in there to explore, and we're still on this video because it's slow motion. I don't know why we have to make sure that the next. This is what we found in the mangroves: 2 sea lions taking a nap on one of the branches of a tree. Okay, so the next day we go to another island, and it's called Isla Floriana, and it's down, we're down south again, and it's famous for Post Office Bay. This is a post office that the sailors set up on this island back in the late 1700s, that when they stopped, they found out that this island had fresh water, fresh spring water. So they could refill their water supply. They would take tortoises off and put it in their boats for meat, and they would rest. And they created this post office made out of a wine barrel. And what you do is you put your letter to your family in it, and you're hoping some other sailor comes by, and he goes and looks at the letters and says, "Oh, I'm going back to England. This person left a letter for their family. I'm going to, out of kindness," that sailor takes it to England and tries to deliver it to his family the best way he can. And so he puts a letter in there, and he's hoping that someone will reciprocate and take, maybe he's from Spain, and they'll take it to Spain because they're going back to Spain. So it's a post office system they set up back in the late 1700s. But when I was mentioning that about them taking turtles off the islands, it's because the turtles they would take the turtles to supply their food, because turtles can live up to a year. These tortoises, the land tortoises, without food or water, they store it. So that's the perfect food for these whalers to put in their boat. So when they need fresh tortoise soup, they can just butcher one of the tortoises and they'll have fresh meat. So that kind of decimated the land tortoises, one of the reasons. Okay, on the next picture, what do we have? Oh, we have a crab that we saw. And they're all over the place. Okay, now on the next day we went to Santa Cruz. We're going back north again, and it's east of Isabel, the Seahorse Island. And we, now we're gonna go see the land tortoises. So, when you see the next slide, look how green that is. So this is an older island. It's had time to mature and to grow, and it had the proper rainfall at this altitude for this, all of this vegetation. So on the next slide, we see our first large tortoise, and they're huge. And on the next slide, it shows the habitat. You see them just all over the place. And I have something to say about the tortoises. At one time, there were 250,000, believed to be 250,000 tortoises on the islands, and now there's 15,000. And they're scattered throughout the different islands. And there's 11 species, with 4 species being extinct. But because of the Charles Darwin Research Station, they breed and release these tortoises to maintain their population. But what caused the demise? Well, the sailors, but also the goats. The goats that they brought in ate up all the vegetation and were destroying the islands. They were multiplying. When the settlers came and stayed and brought their goats and cattle, the goats destroyed the habitat. And then they realized, we can't have goats here. So what they did was they took one goat, they sprayed it orange and stuck a GPS chip in it. And they sent it off. And goats are real sociable, so the goat went to find other goats. And they followed the goat, and when they found them, they shot them all dead, except for the orange goat. And then they took the goat to the next island, and he found them, and that's how they eliminated the goats from the island. But they had to do it because they were ruining the environment, and the land iguanas were dying, the tortoises didn't have food, and so it was bad. So on the next slide is, here they are getting some water in a mud hole. And on the next slide, they were talking about what they eat. And they're vegetarians, and they eat grasses and plants and cactus and avocados. And this is an avocado tree, so I'd never seen an avocado tree, so I went under it and I was looking for avocados, and I couldn't find any. And so, shoot, it must not be the season. And so I just stepped aside, and then all of a sudden, plop. Avocado fell down, and I went, and I picked it up and went, wow, it's kind of yellow. And the naturalist said, well, if you save that, in a few days, it's going to be ripe and you can eat it. And I said, no, I'm going to leave it here for the tortoises. So I dropped it. But my husband went and picked it up on the next slide. And there he is posing with it. And then what he did was he tossed it gently to a land tortoise. So on the next slide, if you can play that video, the land tortoise was very excited to receive that avocado. And that shows him eating it, but he might be having trouble with that. I guess, I don't know why it's in slow motion.
No, it's not banging at all.
Oh. Well, we don't have to see it. But the tortoise gratefully ate the avocado really fast. So, now we come to the last day of our cruise. The next slide. And what do we see on the next slide? Well, so I think we got it. It must have. We're almost finished. So on the last day, well, I had the land iguanas I wanted to show you, but on the last day, they dumped us off for deep sea snorkeling again, and they dumped us into this area where I was instantly surrounded by 35 sea lions, all swimming around me, and one came up and looked at me, and because he was wondering what I was, and then he did a flip, and then he went off, and then here come the dolphins, and they swam by me, and more sea turtles and beautiful fish, and I was in heaven again for an hour and a half. And then, well, here's Mark. He finally found a place to sit down, but he had to share the bench with these sea lions. And what's on the next picture? Oh, this is when we got to the hike. He was showing us the vegetation that the land iguanas eat, and they eat cactus. And on the next slide, we saw a goat. So that's when he told us the story of the goat, and he had to call in. There's a goat on this island, so anyway, they're going to have to do something about that goat. And then on the next slide is the video of the land iguana, but I don't know if we're going to see it or not. But it was so cool because it was 10 yards away. And we go, oh, look at that. Look, and we saw a lot of them, but we saw this one, and it was so cool because it decided to come at us. And so from 10 yards, it came all the way past us and then walked down the path. So we got really good videos of that. It's yellow. You can see it's yellow. And they have a pink one too, but we didn't see a pink land iguana. And so that, I think that's the, oh, good, you can go that way. And then we'll go again, go again. Oh, there it is. Okay, here it is. It came from 10 yards, and it just came all the way. I think it's, anyway, it doesn't matter. They move slowly anyway, so it's probably in fast motion. So that might be my last slide. Is there anything else? Oh yes, we went back, and there are flamingos. And usually there's a lot more, but for some reason we just saw 2. But I didn't expect to see pink flamingos there. And I think that might be my last slide. But this is a professional film of our cruise that they made, if you want to see it. If we can play it.